Welcome to the video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at another option if you don't want to buy one of the pre-built style 160 class quadcopters like the one we have here. This is the X160 that we've already reviewed on the channel and comes with everything on that you need, including an FPV system. Now this is using really small little motors from DYS. These guys are actually 1104 4000 kV motors. It has a little baby CC3D in the middle, 10 amp ESCs in each of the corners, and it is pretty much ready to fly out the box. You just add your radio and you add your battery. If you want to see more about this, I'll put a link up here so you can go and see it. However, there are those of us like me who actually enjoy the process of building your own. So for those instances, we're going to start looking at some of the components in the series on the micro quadcopters, where you can actually start to put something like this together yourself with your own motors, ESCs and other bits and pieces. So the thing we're going to actually look at today is going to be one of the many frames that are currently on option. This one is a DTI frame. It's from banggood.com, so I need to say a very big thank you to those guys for sending us this. We are going to set this out of the packet and we'll have a quick look. And what you actually get is the frame itself. Again, kind of more of a kind of dead cat style with the front arms slightly wider apart. You get the top frame that goes on the top. You get a PCB, which you can either mount in a normal configuration or you can snap it out the middle to mount it in the middle of this little guy. And then you have a whole load of spacers, including some nice washers which are there to separate the power distribution board from the rest of it. This is actually a Grasshopper 160mm frame, and what I'll do is I'll very quickly stop the video and we'll put it together. I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll talk about what you would normally have to get in addition to a frame to put on this guy to make it into a flyable model. So let me stop the video here, let me go and grab my screwdrivers and quickly pop it together. To put the frame together is very straightforward. All you have to do is use the smaller 5mm nylon bolts to go through the plate, the power distribution board. You put the little washer in the middle so that it is off the carbon fibre and electrically isolated, and then pop a nut on the bottom. You do that for each of the four corners. Obviously you have to remove the power distribution board from the larger mounting plate, and then you pop the longer nylon mounts into each of these four holes. And it's just a case of popping the top on and then using the screws to go through, and there you have your quad. Now, one thing to mention about the power distribution board, which I'm quite impressed about, is that it does have plus 5 volts out, and it gives us a couple of those feeds, one on the front and one on the back, or side to side if you're mounting it slightly the other way round. So you can use opto isolated ESCs or ESCs that don't provide the 5 volts for the flight controller, because this will work fine. It doesn't, however, provide the main battery voltage to each of the ESCs in the corners, and what I mean by that is both of these pads here are positive, both of these pads are negative, so if you're mounting the ESCs out here on the arms, then you're going to have to put the positive lead to here and then feed the negative lead over. Not a big problem, but it would be nice if in each corner there was a positive and negative terminal. It would mean you can keep all the leads nice and short and very neat. So let's talk about what else you would have to buy to make this into a quadcopter, and then we'll talk about the frame at the end. The first thing, of course, you're going to need is you're going to need some motors. Now, the motors we looked at on the pre-built 160 class quad were those DYS 1104s. Now, I have found those still very expensive. They're beautiful little motors, but they're still quite costly. The ones that I would recommend at the moment is to probably go something for a 1306, 3100 kV motor. They're still really small. They would fit on these arms beautifully, and they would provide loads of lift. You'll obviously need some props for those and also some speed controllers. So I'd probably go for something like a 10 or 12 amp speed controller with those motors, typically with a battery eliminator circuit. If you don't use a battery eliminator circuit, if you get opto ones, then that's fine. You can pull the 5 volts from the center. You're also going to need a mini receiver. Now, there actually isn't a ton of space on here. You could, if you really wanted to, actually mount the flight controller on top of the power distribution board. That's the same mounting holes for a classic CC3D or a NAS-A32, and that would provide a really neat setup if you wanted to do it that way. So you can actually mount the board on here, and then you would kind of have your FPV equipment all on the top, usually the battery slung underneath. The challenge with that is, what do you do with your receiver? The receiver I'd recommend for something like this, again, I'd go for something really small, ideally something like an R616XN. That's the really small one that's at ppm. It's also on the channel. Or something like a D4R2, the smallest receiver that you can get for the FR Sky radios. The other option, if you didn't want to actually put your flight controller on top of here, I'm tempted to actually put a little plate on top of the power distribution board and then pop one of the really small flight controllers on here. And as you can see, with all the cables taken off, it is really small. So if you wanted to mount your NAS-A32 in a place where you could see it, it would fit beautifully on the top of the model. And something like that on one of the nano receivers or a satellite receiver would be a great choice for a frame of this size. However, as we've said before, I think the best option here is to actually cut yourself a little carbon fiber plate to go on top of the power distribution board, and I'd probably pop it on top of there so it's away, all hidden, and then the top I can use for some lightweight FPV kit. The last thing you're going to need is obviously some form of battery. I'd recommend that you go for no more than about an 850 milliamp hour battery. You want something that's going to give you reasonable flight time, but these kind of craft don't cope with lots of weight with these small little cute motors. The only thing I would say is, if you're going for 850, try and get yourself something like a 30C pack, and that will have more than enough power to actually provide the lift. So in summary, this is an option for those pilots that don't want to buy one of those pre-built craft like the X160 that we looked at the start of the video. This is a nice frame, it's reasonably rigid, it's going to be pretty solid in flight. The thing with these smaller craft that I found is that they do tend to bounce. There isn't the weight in these, so you don't tend to have the catastrophic crashes where things are getting snapped off. Obviously with this frame it's all one piece, which is great for lightweight, but it does mean that if you do damage one of the arms or snap something, then you're going to have to replace the whole thing. But they're pretty inexpensive, so that wouldn't be a disaster if you had to. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video. There are lots of other videos on the channel, and they're carefully ordered into playlists, so you may find that there are other videos on this same subject that you can go and watch. So I would recommend going into the playlist area of Painless360 YouTube channel and looking around and seeing what there is. You never know what you might find. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and happy flying.